Hello. Today we're looking at research. Now, you've already hopefully read over the summer break, but at this kind of stage we'd like you to start to plan your ideas and begin further research trails. And just to clarify that, I wouldn't start delving very much deeper into research until you have spoken with your dissertation advisor. So following that initial meeting, you need to kind of fine-tune your research, start to decide where you think it's going to be going and read deeper into certain subjects. So what we're hoping to do here is to provide some kind of definition of what research might be at level 6. I'd like to talk to you about research and the critical argument. I'd like to talk to you about how you can come to new ideas through your research, and finally organising and evidencing your research. So what is research? Now, we do have some study skills course materials, and since the nuts and bolts of research are not too different between level 4 and level 6, the key difference is what you do with your research at level 6. Do look at our course materials, please. There's a hyperlink in this presentation, so please have a look. If you can't hyperlink from the video, we will include it on the presentation notes, so the actual PowerPoint notes. Now, this is Bloom's taxonomy. What I was saying before about how you use research, you can see that here, because really knowledge, what we know, the facts we know, that's fine, but you can't just represent those to us and pass a dissertation. You have to understand those facts, and one of the ways we show that is through applying them to something specific, and that would be your dissertation subject or perhaps an art object. Part of your dissertation is always going to be concerned with tangible, real things. The ideas you find from your research, you apply to those real things. So that's the start of research. You need to analyse your research, break it down into component pieces, see how it works, see what it means, see what it adds to the picture, how it might work in relationship with your subject, your topic. And from that analysis, what we hope is you come to synthesise new ideas. So you're creating something, you're thinking about something, an area of practice or a body of work or an idea in itself about your contemporary practice that you haven't thought about before. You're finding out these facts, you're understanding them, you're applying them to this topic, and maybe you're coming up with some new ideas. And finally, you're evaluating your research. You're seeing where it fits within a framework. Is it valid? Is it relevant? How far is it useful? How far isn't it useful? What kind of different perspectives has your research shown you about that area of practice? So it's difficult to talk about, say, your dissertation will be researched in such and such a way, because everybody's dissertation is so incredibly and entirely different. But I can tell you, it's what you do with your research, what you do with that fact finding, and how it interacts with you and your subject. That's what really matters at level 6. Now, critical argument. Research facts provide the evidence for your critical argument. So you start off with this idea of evidence. The work here, I'll go into this particular sort of model later, but you're putting together evidence to make a claim, and then you're evaluating that claim, seeing how relevant it is, making a kind of central point about it. If we look closer into this example, our evidence states that the artist has stated his work is not motivated by ideas of burial and transformation. A psychological critic has said one can never know entirely one's own motivations, and from those pieces of research we've made a claim that the artist might not be entirely able to unpick their own motivations. And we have a third piece of evidence. All of this is totally fictional, by the way. The artist has just held 6 successive exhibitions in cemeteries, and each of these exhibitions have been entitled Death 1, Death 2 and Death 3. So we can make a claim from that, which is that the artist's work shows a strong connection to ideas of death and the afterlife. And this is a bit of a silly example, it's one I've made up, but because of course the artist's work could show all sorts of different things depending on what the artist's work actually was. But as an example of a critical argument, these two things make claims that might result in an evaluation that is that the meaning we perceive in the work due to context where it's shown is different to and potentially more valid in unpicking the meaning of a work of art than the artist's own statements. So it's an example, it's not a brilliant example, but try and apply that kind of way of thinking to some of the things that you've found out and to your topic. So I'm going to go back and just point out that if you're interested in using this kind of model of a critical argument, in the actual presentation, follow the links to resources perhaps from Hong Kong University. This is an entire philosophy course, it's totally free. One of the parts of the course is how to argument map, which is what I'm showing you here. Okay. So research at level 6. At level 6, the critical argument should provide a stimulus for your own ideas, and ideally your dissertation will be organised around your own ideas. So your research might give you evidence that leads you to draw a particular conclusion, and that conclusion is the result of your engagement with this wider idea. So you've got this idea from your research, and you might want to explore that with different artists, different ideas about context, whichever way you want to. You have a lot of freedom in the dissertation. But this is what we mean when we talk about research trails. I've given you an example where we found out a little bit of information, and that's led me to come up with quite an interesting idea, I think, surrounding that. And I would want to go and explore that idea further, see if that statement is supported or contradicted by different evidence from different artists. And usually what you find is that the actual situation is far, far more complicated than you ever thought it was. And this is a little bit of an aphorism, but people often say you leave degree level courses realising how little you know. I think it's quite true. The more you find out about things, often you realise that you've just kind of discovered the tip of the iceberg. You know so little, and there's so much more to find out about a given topic or idea. Right, what kind of further investigation might the evaluation from the example I've given you spark? So if we look at ideas about the meaning we perceive in the work due to context, where it is shown is different to and potentially more valid than the artist's own statements, I would be looking what bigger pictures might that hint at? What questions does that claim I've come up with ask? And how could we try to answer these questions with further research? So research kind of loops around. It's not as a straight line. It's a cyclical process where you find something interesting and you go off and investigate it, and that leads you to come up with something even more interesting. And you're making a lot of notes. You're putting together an awful lot of information. And think about it. Do you think that kind of research trail might provoke new and interesting ideas regarding how the context of your studio practice could be manipulated to affect the meaning? Right, lots of information. Ways of organising this information. It's crucial you organise your information. I used to get a lot of dissertation students coming to me with lots and lots of journals, lots and lots of books, just full of information. And the problem was you can't see the information then. It's very difficult to remember what you were thinking about sort of 6 months ago. The dissertation's a long process. So do try to get the information out of the books. Do try to build in breaks for yourself so you can pull back from that information, so you can think, okay, I need to look at something else here. Use post-it notes perhaps to mark key passages and then transfer these to your walls, and you can then argument map and see your evidence. And some groups work with me on that technique at level 5. If you're using online research an awful lot, you could consider using a site like Pearl Trees. I'll include a link to my own research on Pearl Trees. It's just a visual way of cutting out snapshots from documents. And also some people swear by apps like Evernote or RefWorks, all sorts of apps that you can use. Find one that works for you because you've got a lot of information. Do keep stopping, do reflect on your reading. Synthesize this information as you go along. If you're a visual thinker, visually plan your work using mind maps or drawings, or perhaps even colour-coded. Whatever makes your research notes meaningful to you, because you're the person who's going to have to put them together into your dissertation. Always please keep a record of where you found your research facts. Make sure you evidence your research by referencing in line and in a reference list. And if you're worried about that, do follow the information on our online course, which is accessible through StudentNet. You can find out information for research, a little bit of an add-on, but I wanted to give you some ways of starting those research trails. A college library is always great. Athens is very good. If you're unsure of how to access Athens, do go and ask the library staff. Google Scholar and academia.edu, both really, really useful resources. Google Scholar will give you a lot of kind of recently published theses. So you'll get some information. If you can find some of these that are about the body of work or the subject that you're looking at, you've got some sort of contemporary reference that you can use to bounce your ideas off. And academia.edu, again, it's free to join. It's sort of lots of academic submissions, academic articles, again, recently published thesis. So really quite useful. I hope that's been helpful. Any worries or concerns about your research, again, your thesis advisor is probably the best person to advise you, because they'll know you and your research topic and the particular information you're putting across. Thank you.